Welcome to True Echo, where untold stories rise and echo through every heart. Today's story will leave you breathless. It's about one girl who walked into the Ivy League's most elite arena, surrounded by mockery, whispers, and sabotage, and still emerged with the trophy in her hands. They laughed when she walked on stage, but they weren't laughing for long. Stay until the end, because what you're about to witness isn't just a debate win, it's a triumph over centuries of prejudice. The gates of Yale had never looked taller or colder. Jessica Bennett, 17, from the 7th Ward of New Orleans, stood before them, her mother's thrifted blazer hanging loosely on her shoulders, her notebook clutched tight. It wasn't the crisp autumn air that made her shiver. It was the stairs. Inside the historic auditorium, a wave of silence greeted her entrance. Conversations halted mid-sentence. All eyes landed on the lone black girl with natural curls and worn sneakers. A blonde girl in the front row didn't bother to whisper. "This is Yale debate, not a community picnic," she said, smirking. Laughter rippled. Jessica felt every laugh like a pin to the chest. But she didn't flinch. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, "They can't take your worth unless you let them." Then came the voice that sliced deeper. "Are we recruiting community volunteers this year, Professor?" said a tall, smug student, Tyler Montgomery. Son of wealth, heir to prestige, and as Jessica would come to learn, a master manipulator. Professor Grant's glare silenced the laughter, but Jessica saw it in her eyes too, the doubt. The same silent judgment, just hidden behind spectacles and syllabi. Jessica retreated to the back of the library after orientation, unseen and uninvited. She sat in the furthest corner and opened her debate notebook. She wasn't here to be liked. She was here to win. Her fingers trembled less as she wrote, facts about educational inequity, legacy admissions, and the data behind who truly belongs at Ivy League institutions. Across the library, Tyler Montgomery's smirk didn't fade. "Let her hope," he whispered to his clique. "Hope makes the fall funnier." Jessica didn't hear him. But she didn't need to. She knew the kind of battle she was in. Jessica spent every waking moment in that library corner, building her argument like armor. The walls of Yale might have been lined with centuries of legacy and power, but she was lining her mind with truth, data, and stories like her own. Her fingers moved furiously, flipping through books, highlighting passages, jotting notes, piecing together a narrative not just to win, but to shatter assumptions. The first round of debates arrived like a storm. Jessica's name was barely acknowledged when announced. The topic, affirmative action and academic meritocracy. She stood across from a confident prep school senior, who opened with a polished, rehearsed speech dismissing affirmative action as a crutch for the underprepared. Jessica took a breath, stepped to the podium, and spoke not from rehearsed rhetoric, but from life. When your home is underwater and your school never reopened after the storm, your GPA isn't a measure of your mind. It's a measure of your odds of survival. The room hushed. She spoke of the hurdles black students face daily, the lack of AP classes in underfunded schools, the bias in standardized testing, and the myth of meritocracy. And when she stepped down, the silence gave way, not to pity, but to something new, attention. She advanced. Tyler Montgomery, seated in the back with arms folded, was less amused now. His brows furrowed. This wasn't supposed to happen. Jessica was meant to be crushed early, forgotten before the quarterfinals. Yet, here she was. And then came the moment that changed everything. Late that night, as Jessica reviewed materials in her dorm, her phone buzzed. An email from the debate committee marked urgent. Subject change, semi-final topic updated. Jessica's heart jumped. The new topic? The negative effects of social media on human interaction. She froze. All her preparation, days and nights spent compiling evidence on education and race, was suddenly obsolete. She had less than 10 hours to build an entirely new case. And she didn't question it. She didn't think. She simply worked. All night, Jessica read, scribbled, revised. Her laptop battery died at 4 a.m., so she finished her outline by hand under the flickering hallway light. She walked into the semi-finals the next morning running on 3 hours of sleep and raw determination. That's when she saw the smirk. Tyler Montgomery stood near the judge's table, chatting calmly with a committee assistant. He glanced her way, and smirked. His eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Jessica's breath caught. Something wasn't right. As she entered the hall, Professor Grant approached. "Jessica. Are you ready for your topic?" she asked. Jessica hesitated. "Yes, but the email said." Grant frowned. "What email?" Jessica showed her. Grant's face hardened. "There's been no change. The topic remains the same." Jessica's blood ran cold. Grant leaned in. "If you go off topic, you'll be disqualified." Jessica's knees nearly buckled. Across the room, Tyler leaned against a column, one eyebrow raised, watching her like a wolf circling prey. The forged email. The timing. The smirk. It had been a trap. Jessica had a choice: collapse under the weight of sabotage, or rise above it. She looked down at her useless notes, then slowly, calmly, closed the notebook. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. From rage. From purpose. From the fire that only injustice can ignite. She walked to the podium, faced a sea of skeptical, expectant eyes, and spoke from the heart. "I apologize if today's speech isn't polished. But what I offer is truth. Not typed. Lived." And then she told her story, of Hurricane Katrina, of a community left behind, of a mother who turned to social media in desperation when the government offered none. And of strangers who answered that call online. She turned the sabotage into her strength. And when she finished, the auditorium didn't just applaud, it rose. Even Professor Grant clapped once, subtly, but meaningfully. Jessica left the stage knowing she hadn't just recovered. She'd flipped the entire script. Tyler didn't smile anymore. His smirk had vanished. And so had his certainty. The battle was no longer hers alone. It was theirs. But Jessica was ready. The hallway outside the debate auditorium buzzed with disbelief. Jessica leaned against the cool stone wall, heart still pounding. The standing ovation had left her breathless, not because she'd craved applause, but because she had spoken her truth and been heard. For the first time since arriving at Yale, she felt like she wasn't standing alone. But that feeling didn't last long. As she turned the corner toward the judge's lounge, she saw Tyler Montgomery. He was hunched slightly over a bench, his phone clutched tightly in his hand. His usual mask of indifference was gone, replaced by something sharper, more dangerous. Their eyes met. His lips barely moved, but Jessica could read them. "This isn't over." Jessica kept walking. She didn't look back. Inside her dorm that evening, exhaustion overtook her. She collapsed into bed, shoes still on, her notebook beside her. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that forged email, Tyler's smirk, and the knowledge that she was one mistake away from being disqualified. The system wasn't built for her. But she wasn't here to ask for a fair fight, she was here to win despite the odds. The semi-final matchups were posted the next morning. Jessica Bennett versus Emma Carlson. Emma was Yale's darling, polished, poised, and famously undefeated on the East Coast circuit. She came from privilege, attended private school since preschool, and was backed by a full-time coach. Jessica knew this wouldn't be a debate. This would be a war. As she studied in the library that morning, Emma approached her, not with contempt like Tyler, but with a polite, almost distant tone. "Good luck," she said. "I hope this match is fair." Jessica raised her eyes. "I'll make sure it is." Later that afternoon, the grand auditorium swelled with anticipation. Students packed the benches, professors lined the walls, and the judges sat rigid in their high-backed chairs. Tyler occupied the front row, his arms crossed, his gaze like a blade. Emma went first. Her voice was like silk, smooth, compelling, perfectly timed. She referenced Aristotle and Plato, quoted recent studies, and painted a meticulous picture of the dangers of social media on modern empathy and attention spans. It was flawless. Jessica's palms were sweating as she approached the podium. She had no slides, no notes. But she had something else, the truth. When I was 9, a hurricane took everything, our home, our school, our neighbors. My mother had no car, no money, and no voice in the systems built to protect us. But she had a phone. A cheap, cracked phone. Jessica told them about the Facebook post her mother had made, begging strangers for help. About how a volunteer group from Chicago showed up with supplies because a friend of a friend had seen the post. About how they slept in a high school gym and used Twitter to find out which roads were open. About how technology didn't isolate them, it saved them. I'm not saying social media is perfect, she concluded, her voice shaking slightly. But for families like mine, it's not a distraction. It's a lifeline. Silence. Thick, resonant silence. Emma sat unmoving. A single tear rolled down her cheek. The judges murmured quietly. One nodded. Professor Grant looked down at her scorecard and made a small mark. Then the applause came, soft at first, then thunderous. Jessica stepped down, breathless, not from nerves this time, but from release. Emma found her in the hall after. I can't believe I'm saying this, she said, eyes damp but smiling, but you deserve to win. Jessica smiled back. Thank you. That night, the semi-final results were posted. Final round, Jessica Bennett versus Tyler Montgomery. The names were typed in bold font, side by side like destiny itself had written them. The whole campus buzzed with excitement. Did you hear? The girl from New Orleans made it to the finals. She beat Carlson. Can you believe it? Jessica heard the whispers as she walked across campus. Some were laced with admiration. Others, with disbelief. But all of them spoke one truth, no one was ignoring her anymore. She went to bed early that night, needing strength for what lay ahead. As she closed her eyes, she thought of her mother's voice, her childhood home, and the girl she used to be, afraid to take up space. Tomorrow, she would take up all of it. The day of the final arrived with a quiet that felt like the calm before a storm. Outside, leaves whispered in the crisp New Haven air, but inside Yale's grand auditorium, tension hummed like electricity beneath the polished floors. Jessica stood alone backstage, gripping the edge of her podium notes, not because she needed them, but because she needed the memory of how hard she had worked for this. Just behind the velvet curtain, Tyler Montgomery waited on the opposite side. Their showdown was more than a debate. It was a collision of two worlds, two ideologies, one fueled by generational privilege, the other by sheer resilience. The final topic appeared on the giant screen above the stage. The role of traditional institutions in preserving academic values. Jessica's heart beat faster. The wording couldn't have been more ironic. This debate was personal now. Tyler stepped to the podium first, exuding his usual air of superiority. His blazer was flawless, his posture regal, his voice sharp as he spoke. Institutions like Yale have always safeguarded our nation's highest academic standards. They are fortresses of rigor and excellence. But today, that fortress is under attack, by misplaced emotional appeals, social pressure, and diluted standards disguised as inclusion. His gaze darted briefly toward Jessica with the subtle precision of a scalpel. We must not sacrifice excellence for the sake of empty diversity quotas. The audience shifted in their seats. A few students frowned. Others nodded. Tyler closed with a tight smile, turning from the podium as if he'd already secured victory. Jessica stepped forward, her steps deliberate, her presence grounded. She looked across the crowd, at the judges, at the students, and at the people who had whispered behind her back since the day she arrived. "I agree," she began, her voice firm. "Institutions must protect academic values. But I ask you, are those values truly being preserved, when generations of brilliant minds are locked out before they even get a chance?" She paused, scanning the room. The fortress Tyler speaks of isn't just protecting excellence. It's also protecting exclusion. A ripple moved through the crowd. She continued, voice unwavering, "I had to fight for a public education in a school with no working science lab. I taught myself debate from YouTube videos and practiced in a library with no AC. Does that make me less worthy of being here?" Jessica met Tyler's gaze head-on. If these institutions are so noble, why do they bend so easily to legacy admissions? To money? To names? Gasps echoed. A few students sat forward, riveted. Some professors leaned in. Tyler's jaw tightened. Jessica lowered her voice, her final words soft but full of fire. "I'm not asking you to lower standards. I'm asking you to recognize that brilliance doesn't always wear a prep school uniform or carry a last name etched in the marble of this institution's halls. Sometimes, it comes in thrift store blazers, with a backpack full of dreams." She stepped back. The silence was deafening, deep, long, and charged with the weight of every word. Then came the applause. Louder than before. Unrestrained. Real. Tyler sat frozen, his hands clenching the arms of his seat, his perfect composure unraveling in slow motion. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had always been the closer, the victor, the golden boy. Now he was the one drowning under the spotlight. As the final scores were tallied backstage, Tyler stood near the hallway, pacing like a man whose empire had just been threatened. Jessica passed by him on her way to get water, their shoulders brushing. "You don't belong here," he hissed. Jessica stopped, turned slowly, and with a calm so firm it cut deeper than anger, replied, "That's exactly what you're afraid of." She didn't wait for his response. Back in the main hall, the head judge stepped forward with the final results in hand. The room fell still. Jessica closed her eyes. She didn't pray for victory. She just prayed to be heard. The judge's voice rang clear. "And the winner of the Yale National Debate Tournament. Jessica Bennett, 7th Ward High School, New Orleans." The room exploded. Students leaped to their feet. Professors stood in disbelief. Even Emma Carlson joined the applause, her eyes shining with admiration. Tyler didn't move. He stood like a statue, his future shattering inside his chest. His name, his legacy, had just been dethroned. Jessica felt the flood of emotion wash over her, pride, vindication, awe. But also, clarity. This moment wasn't just hers. It belonged to every girl who had ever been told to sit down, to every voice that had been drowned out. Professor Grant made her way to the stage. She took Jessica's hand in both of hers. "You didn't just win," she said. "You changed the game." Jessica smiled, tears spilling down her cheeks. Behind her, the trophy glinted under the stage lights. But it was her voice, the one they once tried to silence, that now echoed across every marble hall at Yale. After the applause died down and the crowd began to thin, Jessica remained seated on the edge of the stage, the trophy beside her, her fingers lightly brushing its gold trim as if needing to confirm it was real. The thunder in her heart had not faded, not fear, not anxiety, but something quieter, deeper. It was peace. She had stood her ground. Not only in front of Tyler Montgomery, but in front of a crowd that once doubted her very presence. But the moment didn't stay untouched for long. From the far end of the stage, Professor Grant approached, her face unreadable beneath her signature glasses. In her hand, she held a manila folder, slim but crisp, the Yale seal embossed on its cover. "Jessica," she said quietly. "May I speak with you?" Jessica nodded and followed her into a private faculty room just off stage. The room was dim, the soft lamplight casting long shadows over the polished wood table where Grant set the folder. "I asked our IT department to investigate that forged email," Grant said, gesturing for Jessica to sit. "We tracked it." Jessica leaned in. Her chest tightened. It was sent from the private VPN account of one Tyler Montgomery. He tried to disguise it, but not well enough. Jessica felt both shock and confirmation wash over her like a single wave. "I knew it was him," she said, her voice firm, not bitter. "I believe you," Grant replied. "But Yale, we must protect the institution's reputation. We won't go public, not yet. At least, not without your cooperation and full consent." Jessica stared at the folder. "Will he be punished?" Grant hesitated. "He'll be privately sanctioned. He'll lose scholarship considerations. And, we've informed the admissions board. It wasn't a public reckoning. But it was a consequence." "He won't be disqualified?" Jessica asked, more disappointed than angry. "No. And I understand if that frustrates you." Grant paused. "But here's what you've done that punishment never could, you exposed him without sinking to his level." Jessica looked down at her hands. "I don't want revenge." Grant tilted her head. "Then what do you want?" "I want him to understand what he almost destroyed. Not for me, but for every girl like me watching." Grant nodded slowly, her expression softening with something like admiration. "That might be the most powerful thing you've said all weekend," she murmured. Outside, the sun was setting behind the stained-glass windows of Yale's hallowed halls, casting streaks of orange and violet across the floor. Jessica walked alone through the hallway, clutching the folder Grant had given her but unsure if she'd ever open it again. Then she saw him. Tyler stood at the far end of the corridor. His once perfect posture slouched. His face pale. His hands jammed into his pockets. He looked up when she approached, but he didn't speak. For the first time, Jessica didn't feel the need to say anything either. But as she passed him, she paused. "I forgive you," she said, softly. Tyler blinked, stunned. "But I won't forget." Then she kept walking, her shoulders tall, her steps light. Back in her dorm room, Jessica placed the trophy gently on her desk and called her mother. Catherine Bennett picked up on the first ring. "Jessica. Are you okay? How did it go?" "I've been refreshing the website every 5 seconds. "I won, Mama," Jessica said, her voice cracking. Silence. Then a choked sob. "You won." Jessica nodded, smiling through her tears even though her mother couldn't see it. "I did. I knew it. I always knew it." They talked long into the night. About resilience. About dignity. About how no title, no trophy, could ever be more important than knowing your own worth. When Jessica finally fell asleep, she dreamt not of Yale, not of applause, but of her mother's arms and the warm scent of home. And in that dream, she was 9 years old again, staring at a flooded street with nothing but her mother's hand gripping hers, and the quiet certainty that one day, she'd find her voice. That day had come. And she was just getting started. Jessica's return to New Orleans was nothing short of a homecoming celebration. As her flight descended over the familiar curves of the Mississippi River, she looked out at the sprawling neighborhoods below, her heart pulsing with both nostalgia and pride. The same streets that had once felt like walls around her dreams now looked like the launch pad that had sent her soaring. The moment she stepped into Louis Armstrong Airport, she was greeted by cheers. Her entire debate team from 7th Ward High was there, holding handmade signs, waving streamers, and chanting her name like she was a hometown hero. Even the school principal, Mrs. Reyes, who had once begged school board members for enough budget to keep after-school programs alive, had tears in her eyes. But none of it compared to seeing her mother. Catherine Bennett pushed through the crowd and threw her arms around her daughter, holding her as if afraid to let go. Jessica melted into the embrace, overcome by the gravity of what they had both survived, what they had both built. "You did it, baby," Catherine whispered. "You made the whole world see you." Jessica smiled through her tears. "No, Mama. You helped them hear me." The weekend turned into a series of neighborhood celebrations. Churches lit candles in her honor. A local journalist interviewed her for a Sunday feature. Kids followed her around the block asking questions about Yale, about the trophy, about what it was like to make those judges clap. But while the attention was new, the challenges at home were not. Jessica walked past the abandoned house 3 doors down, still unrepaired from the storm. She noticed the broken streetlight that flickered over the same corner she used to sit with her debate notebook, studying by phone light when the power was out. And then, on a quiet Tuesday morning, a letter arrived. It bore the official Yale seal. Jessica stared at the envelope for a full minute before she found the courage to open it. She unfolded the letter slowly, scanning the words. "Congratulations, Jessica Bennett. You have been awarded a full-ride academic scholarship to Yale University. We look forward to welcoming you in the fall as a student of distinction and honor." Jessica sank onto the edge of her bed. Her hands trembled, not with disbelief, but with the weight of everything it had taken to get here. Every microaggression, every sleepless night, every tear-stained page in her notebook. It had all led to this. Her mother found her moments later, sitting in stunned silence, the letter in her lap. Catherine picked it up, read it slowly, and began to cry, loudly, openly, the way only a mother who has watched her daughter fight through fire can cry. They embraced again, but this time it was different. It wasn't a reunion. It was a beginning. That evening, the community hosted one final gathering at the school gym. Parents, students, teachers, pastors, old neighbors, everyone came. They gave Jessica the mic, and for a moment, she just stood there, overwhelmed. Then she smiled, leaned in, and said, "I want every little girl sitting in this room tonight, every little boy too, to remember this: you don't need to have a perfect suit or a big name. You don't need permission to be powerful. You just need to know who you are." The room erupted in applause. And somewhere, miles away, at the same time, Tyler Montgomery stared at a blank page on his laptop in his dorm room. The silence around him was deafening. His inbox was flooded with messages, some condemning his behavior, others quietly cutting ties. The incident hadn't made headlines, but whispers spread fast in places like Yale. A few professors no longer called on him. His name, once golden, was now associated with failure and disgrace. He had not only lost the tournament. He had lost the illusion of superiority. And deep down, for the first time in his life, he felt it. Shame. Fall returned to Yale with its usual grandeur. Golden leaves scattered across the old cobblestones, and freshmen bustled nervously between classes, clutching books, coffees, and dreams. Among them, walking calmly and purposefully beneath the arching stone gate, was Jessica Bennett, now a first-year student. She wore the same blazer her mother had bought from a thrift store, though now it was pressed and proud. She didn't wear it out of necessity anymore. She wore it as a reminder. Of where she came from. Of what she'd overcome. The Yale campus that had once looked down on her now looked up. Professors greeted her by name. Students who had once whispered cruel jokes now looked her in the eye with quiet respect. Some approached to ask how she'd structured her winning argument, others just wanted to talk. She wasn't just a story anymore. She was a voice. One afternoon, she passed Professor Grant in the corridor. The older woman paused, a subtle smile lifting her stern expression. "Settling in, Miss Bennett?" she asked. Jessica smiled. "Yes, ma'am. I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Grant nodded. "We're glad you're here. Yale needs voices like yours." Then she handed Jessica a slim envelope. "Also, there's an opportunity. A new initiative. A student-led forum on diversity in academic spaces. And the committee would like you to chair it. Jessica blinked. Me? You earned that stage, Jessica. Now it's time to build one for others. Jessica accepted the envelope and nodded. Her voice was steady. I will. Meanwhile, far from the warm welcome and new beginnings, Tyler Montgomery sat in the back row of a small lecture hall. His posture had changed, no longer upright with privilege, but slouched, tense, restless. He kept to himself now. The crowd he once ruled had grown quiet around him. After the investigation, his record wasn't made public, but he lost a prestigious internship and several key faculty recommendations. The damage was subtle, but permanent. And perhaps the harshest consequence of all. He had watched the girl he once mocked become the symbol of everything he pretended to embody: excellence, courage, and integrity. He no longer looked at her with hate. Now, it was something closer to awe. Jessica never gloated. She never pointed or whispered or paid him back in cruelty. She didn't need to. Truth had done that for her. Months later, as winter approached, Jessica stood before a packed auditorium, not for a debate, but for the first meeting of the student forum she now chaired. Behind her, projected on the wall, were the words: access, justice, voice. She began to speak. Everyone deserves a seat at the table. But if there's no chair waiting for you, build your own, and make it impossible to ignore. The students erupted into applause. She smiled. Not because of the sound, but because of what it meant. Her voice had created something lasting. A movement. A message. A legacy. And back in New Orleans, in that small house in the 7th Ward, Catherine Bennett sat watching the live stream of her daughter's speech on her laptop. Tears streaked her cheeks as she whispered to herself, "That's my baby." Jessica Bennett's story wasn't just about winning a trophy. It was about changing the terms of the game. About showing every underestimated soul that being doubted is not the end, sometimes, it's just the beginning. She had walked into Yale as a girl they laughed at. Now, they listened. Jessica Bennett didn't just win a tournament, she redefined what it means to belong. Her courage turned prejudice into power, sabotage into strength, and doubt into undeniable victory. As Jessica said, if there's no chair for you, build your own, and make it impossible to ignore. Thank you for watching. If Jessica's journey inspired you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let us know in the comments. Would you have had the strength to forgive Tyler? And don't forget to subscribe to True Echo for more powerful, real, and unforgettable stories like this.